to our Chess for Beginners lesson number 9. My name is FM Steve, and in today's lesson, we are going to survey some of the openings that are commonly played and will suit you in as much as you continue developing in your chess. So, the openings that I'm going to focus today are the four knights opening. We have the Gyoko piano, the two knights defense, and the Rui Lopez. You'll come to understand them as we go into details about it. So let's start with the four knights game. Now, this is a very simple opening that takes into account all the developing principles. So, in the four knights opening, both players try to develop their pieces as fast as possible, but without major attacks, without major challenges. So it's a very easy opening to understand and to play, especially when you are starting chess. It's very simple. Now, the game normally is goes like e4, e5, knight f3. So the first knight, knight c6, second knight, knight c3, third knight, and knight f6. So that's why it's the four knights opening or four knights game. Now, White's plan is to bring out all his pieces as quickly as possible, but the drawback of this method is that White is not threatening anything. Black has a free choice of moves and several ways of developing. So the game can proceed. White can now play bishop b5, black will play bishop b4, and it looks like it's very similar. So black will just keep on more of like copycatting white. So bishop b4, castled, 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 d3, d6. So the position is more of a reflection of each other. Bishop g5, bishop g4, knight d5, knight d4. So black has adapted a style or a plan of copying white's moves. White still has his advantage of making the first move, but the position is rather lifeless. Now, we want to look at a second game, and this is the Kyoko piano. So the first move, e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6. Now, as opposed to the four knights of knight c3, white can now play bishop c4. Now, Gyoko piano is Italian, and it means quiet. It means quiet game, although as we shall see, it can often lead to fireworks in the middle game. So black also plays bishop c5, and white has different ways of coming with a plan. The first idea is white is attacking the f7 pawn, which tends to be weak. So white is putting a bit some sort of pressure on the f7 pawn by the bishop at c4. And it also makes it very difficult for black to ever advance the pawn to d5. So those are the ideas. White has three plans. The first plan is just to the first plan is just to develop quietly by playing a move like knight c3. Another plan is to play d3, and another one is to castle. So if I go back to the idea of playing d3, is just to think of bringing the bishop out. So the bishop can either move to e3 or g5. This will cause black a few problems, and the position will be more or closely similar to those of the four knights game. White can also try to win more space at the center by coming with ideas like c3, intending to advance the pawn to d4. So c3, planning d4. This can also be a very good plan by white. Let's try to look at this idea of c3, where black will now play knight f6 and white play d4, e takes d, c takes d, bishop check, knight c3, knight takes e4, 0-0, or castle. Knight times c3, pawn takes c3. Now, the opening has led to an exciting open position. White has sacrificed one pawn and is offering a second to get good play. For all his pieces and hope of catching up black's king in the middle. So it can be very exciting. For instance, let's say if black happens to pick, then white has several ways ranging from, in fact, long time white used to give blacks used to prefer playing moves like queen b3, and if black happens to take, then white will go check, king comes to f8, and there is always a very interesting move. This kind of move, even without going into much details, is more likely to win the queen, because now knight there and rook here, and you can see it's an easy way of playing, with the idea to just try to win the queen and probably the game. So it's just one way on how the game can proceed. There are other ways that the game can carry on. Now we want to look at the next opening, and this one is, if you are playing the Gyoko piano, you must expect uh, ideas like the defense. That is, after bishop c4, black may not necessarily play bishop c5, but instead knight f6. So now this is the two knights defense. So in the two knights defense, what happens is, it's called a defense, but it's actually a very aggressive line, because now black is attacking the pawn at e4. So black is attacking the pawn at e4, and white has several ways of proceeding. White can just play knight c3, and the game will more of take shape of the four knights that we looked at before earlier. Or white can also play d3. He can also ignore the threat and play d4. This is now the max land attack. We shall be trying to survey them further. These are of the many options by white. And of course, white can also try to play knight g5 here. The idea is defends the pawn and attacks the f7 pawn. So that is also one of the possible moves that white can play. Now, if white opts for this, then the game can proceed. Black has to first defend f7, and black will play d5. When white picks, black can play knight f5, bishop check, c6, pawn picks, pawn picks. This time, it's black who has sacrificed a pawn. Black has sacrificed a pawn as compensation. He has a pawn firmly established in the center. So it's black who has a pawn at the center. Black is controlling the center, and his pieces are ready. Black's pieces are ready to move into very strong, good squares. So black will be having a lead in development at the expense of sacrificing the pawns. Lastly, we want to look at the Rui Lopez. Now, Rui Lopez, this is an opening that was named after the Spanish priest who studied and recommended it in his chess book as long ago as 1561. It has become a standard weapon with grandmasters throughout the 20th century and 21st century. Uh, it was very popular with world champions like Capablanca and Alekhine before the war, and the favorite in again with Simislav, Fischer, and Karpov. So the opening goes e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop d5. So the difference between Rui Lopez and Caro and Giocopiano is that in Rui Lopez, white is kind of putting a bit of pressure at e5 pawn, because if we take the moves slightly back, when knight c6 was played was more on taking care of the e5 pawn. So if bishop moves to b4, bishop b5, then somehowly there is pressure on this pawn. At this point, white is not, as opposed to the Giocopiano, where white plays bishop c4 and try to attack f7. In this case, the focus is at e5. So we are going to try and look at these uh, openings in depth. Remember, when you are playing chess, you need to have an attacking power, and also you must understand how to defend. So is these are some of the openings that starts with e4 pawn. Also, we had said that when you play, you can also start with the d4. But d4, it's a very positional opening, and sometimes it can be a bit tricky especially for beginners, if they play d4. As you keep developing in chess, you may maybe prefer to play d4, but it's more positional. You need to understand space, you need to understand files, you need to understand good squares for your pieces. With e4, it's very direct. It's a way of bring out your plan to bring out your bishop, plan to bring out your knight and castle. Then bring out the other knight, open up for the second bishop. So it's very easy to more of learn e4 because it's very direct. e4, the reply for black is either e5. Black can of course play e6 and white will keep controlling the center. Black can also play c5 and white will just continue with the normal development, knight f3. So that's why with e4 system, it's very easy to try and play and hopefully get good results. We will look at this more of these openings. In our next lesson, we'll try also to look at what are the defense options for when you are playing, because if you are white, they say white needs to attack and black defense. White attacks by virtue of playing the first move. So you need to know that when you are white, how to carry on with the game, and when you are black, how to get out your pieces to defend and develop in the correct squares. So this has been FM Steve for our chess lesson for beginners, lesson number 9. Today we were surveying the openings for white. Don't forget to like our channel, Better Chess, and let's keep developing our chess together. Thank you. I'll see you again in our next lesson.